All right. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, folks can hear me. Um, Welcome to the first of our 5 town hall events for 2024 related to the theme of language as liberation. I see that folks are still logging on, so I'll wait just a couple of seconds before we start transitioning and beginning the conversation. But the topic for today is the future of world language education research, transdisciplinary connections. And I personally could not be more excited to have this conversation with you all. I couldn't be more excited about the panelists that we have, these wonderful scholars and educators who are going to be able to share their expertise with us. Um, I know that they have a lot of wonderful information to share, and I don't want to take up a lot of their time. So I will go ahead, even though I see folks are still logging on. We have a really big group of folks today, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation here. So our agenda for today, I'll just do a brief introduction about what I hope to accomplish with this town hall event. And then we'll have our guest speakers, Doctors Eris Clemens and Ryuko Kubota, who will share some words of wisdom with us. Then we'll engage in some Q&A with the panelists and some sort of collective reflection as a group. And then we'll talk about what next steps might look like. So I want to remind us that all of these town hall events are related to our strategic plan, which has 5 pillars. We have DEI, professional development, teacher recruitment and retention, research and outreach and advocacy. And this conversation in particular obviously has strong implications for the research pillar, but I also think that it's related to others, such as the DEI pillar and the professional development pillar. And what we want to accomplish with this town hall are 3 things. So we'll do some informing, meaning that we'll share some common information and some common updates. We'll hear some information from experts in the field. Then we'll move on to do some collaborating, which will involve a Q&A with the panelists. We'll do some collective reflection within community. And then we don't want to just leave it there. We don't want this to be a one and done conversation. So we're going to consider, how can we make sure that this is not something that we just talk about tonight and then we just move on to the next thing, right? So we're going to talk about what those next steps might be, maybe what some action items might be, and how folks can continue to be engaged and involved in this conversation even after this town hall event tonight. And it's also important to remember that this is not a step-by-step process. So even though I have it here as inform, collaborate, and act, it doesn't have to happen in this way. This is an iterative process, and these are all elements that are ongoing as we work through this theme. During this presentation, because of the volume of folks who are involved, we're not going to have the chat function available. So if you have a question, you can use the Q&A feature to participate throughout the webinar. And then after our panelists give their presentations, we'll begin the collaborative piece by looking at some of those questions and having them respond to some of the things that you all want to discuss. So that being said, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn it over to Eris Clemens. There's no way that I can give these presenters justice. I would need kind of like a 15-minute time slot on my own just to talk about all of their accomplishments and who they are. So I'm just going to be very broad. Eris Clemens is a wonderful colleague, great friend. We've collaborated before. She is a Hispanic linguistics professor at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And very broadly, she specializes in intersections of race, language, and identity, among many, many other things. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Eris Clemens. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you so much for inviting me here to share some of my perspectives. I will say that as I just looked out of the window and saw a helicopter fly by, I want to begin by acknowledging that many of us are having this conversation amongst what looks to be a nationwide kind of uprising for peace on our campuses, with students kind of occupying their campuses. And what seems like the militarization of the campuses at the same time, um, that has to do with a lot of the ongoing colonial structures that I'm going to talk about in my presentation today. So these structures really are going to shape what I'm saying. And if you hear that helicopter outside of the window right now, it is a kind of reminder of the times that we're speaking in. So I am very excited to be in this space. I entered my work as a linguist from my previous life as a language teacher in both the world language and ESL spaces. And I truly believe that attending to this current moment in history, both on a larger scale and within the field of world language education, is only possible through transdisciplinarity and through self-determination. So for me, my approach to the study of language spans the fields of linguistics, of education, literacy studies, but importantly, also cultural and anthropological and sociological studies as well. And so, in order to understand how I'm able to do my work across these fields while maintaining my commitment to serving communities and to legacies that are often erased in our field of world language education, I'm going to begin by briefly speaking about my positionality and why I do language research. And though this is a short presentation, I'm also going to take a moment to show a poem that I often use to anchor the need for justice and liberatory-oriented scholarship, which is the kind of theme of ACTFL this year. And then I'll speak briefly about the benefits of transdisciplinarity and review a recent study that some colleagues and I conducted mapping the locations of linguistic studies across academic campuses. I'll end with a very brief call to action before passing the floor to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Kubota. So I am the child of an immigrant mother and an African-American father. And as a child, my parents, who were witnesses to an African-American divestment from local public schools in the 1970s and 80s San Francisco Bay Area, they decided to send me to a local version of a freedom school. And this school, the lessons were taught in English, in French, and Swahili. And all of the lessons were connected to the kind of Afro-diasporic ways of knowing. And so as a result of that, I was socialized into this kind of translanguaging practices long before the term translanguaging became popularly used or popularly understood, even though I can say that we probably have quite a ways to go to really understanding what the term means in its fullness. So in addition to my schooling, my home was also filled with a lot of language variety, a lot of different dialects. We had African American English going on, Caribbean English, Caribbean Creolized French, and a local varieties of California English. And I, ever the precocious child that I was, often engaged in multilingual activities, such as correcting my mother's second language English and watching the local Chinese channel for Saturday morning cartoons, much to my older brother's chagrin. And as I think about language education, I think about all the ways that students already bring these kind of established languaging practices with them into the classrooms that we occupy. And so I situate my research, the curriculum and pedagogy development work that I do, and my teaching around this fact. And importantly, because exploring the nature of language allows us insights into the ways that humans construct society, it's really important for me to understand how language functions broadly in order to think about how we can build models for a more just future, especially in the aftermath of colonial formations of power. Okay, so even though time is not on my side, I want to begin with this poem by Afro-Mexican poet Ariana Brown called Dear White Girls in My Spanish Class. And I'll show the poem and then I'll explain why I'm bringing it into our conversation today. But I will start by saying that it has a small curse word in the beginning. Close your ears if that offends you.
New ship.
New ship!
Dear white girls in my Spanish class. I see you. Stumbling so hard you laugh through entire sentences because my ancestors are a punchline and everything that comes out of your mouth is funny. Funny, guess I'm used to being a joke, a brown body splayed and smoldering at the corner of your lip. I just want to know, when you hold the sacred sound on your tongue, do you feel less holy? Why are you here? I bet you thought this class would be easy, since Spanish is what poor brown people speak, right? Not something you actually have to try to understand, not fancy or sophisticated, not like French, the language you love overpronouncing as if compensating for your basic American whiteness. You are not special. You are the reason my grandmother feared her children would speak with accents. So afraid, she buried her first language in the space between blood and bone because your grandparents wouldn't let her make a home outside her body. Did your ancestors protect you from pain by withholding what they knew of a country before this one? Let me be clear. Spanish was given to my people at the end of a sword, forced in our throats gory, sharpened under the colonizer's constant eye. Each rolled R is a red, wet fingerprint pointing me back to this. Spanish is not my native tongue. English is not my native tongue. The languages I speak are bursting with blood, but they are all I have. I own only my hot mouth, speeding against assimilation's clock and a colonial legacy you won't even try to pronounce. So I'll ask again, why are you here? Do you think my grandmother's accent a sickness? One so volatile, you call yourself gringa at every chance, so I won't make fun of you when you make fun of the way my language sounds to you. Don't you know I had to fight for this? For each scrap of culture I could get my hands on, even if its lineage is as European as yours. My father, a Black American man, is descended from slaves. I'm not sure if you understand what that means. I am descended from slaves. I want to know where I come from, but I can only trace my history in one direction, so I am here in yet another Spanish class, desperately reaching for a language I hope will choose me back someday. What is it like to be a tourist in the halls of my shame, to not be expected to speak better than you do, to visit Mexico and not care that people mistake you for being from somewhere else? How does it feel to take a foreign language for fun? To owe your history nothing.
So I showed this poem for so many reasons, but one is because I love it and I love the feeling that the poet has when speaking about her relationship with a language that has its own colonial histories. But more importantly, what Ariana Brown's poem shows us is that there is no language without history, right? There's no language learning, there's no language contact, change, variation. Nothing about our communication is free from the socio-historical contextualizations that we perform and use and understand our languages in. She ends the poem by saying, how does it feel to take a foreign language, to owe your history nothing? And so I believe this is key. When we're thinking about language and when we're thinking about language justice and liberation, we must consider the historical context in which a language has been and is being studied, evaluated, and represented. And so in thinking about the world language education in the United States, there is this kind of very clear history, a history of exclusion that has resulted in kind of socially stratifying practices. And so as a result of this history of socially stratifying practices, the ability to enter, the ability to advance in, to teach in, and to research within world languages has been fractured along these lines of kind of institutional and organizational models of scarcity. And these models decontextualize the potential of world languages as an accessible, representative field, particularly for racially minoritized and economically repressed groups, but I would argue for everybody. And so what can transdisciplinarity do for us in world language education? So easily defined in the Paul Grave Encyclopedia, transdisciplinarity is a practice that transcends disciplines and fields, extending the notion of what is known and knowable and what is possible to discover and create across, between, and beyond our disciplines. And so in regards to how we research and understand language and language teaching, we have to acknowledge that there is no investigation of language or any social science for that matter, that is free from ideology. And there's no objective or better way of doing this because of this. And what this means is that transdisciplinarity, in extending what is possible, allows us ways to move beyond colonial logics and binaries of othering that have resulted in language stigmatization and exclusion within our field. Instead, we can pull from these methodologies and from these theories that allow us to capture both the individual and the generalizability in our field. And that is very powerful. So in thinking about transdisciplinarity from my position as a linguist who studies language across a variety of fields, I published this study with some colleagues where we asked the question, what exactly is linguistics? And this question came in response to several who have attempted to gatekeep us out of our field with claims of field-specific rules about how and what we can do with our linguistics. And so from both our research positionalities as well as our lived experiences, we knew that to answer what exactly is linguistics would depend on who you asked, right? And so even more challenging is to answer who is a linguist and what do they do? So this challenge and the urge to define linguistics is so visceral because of this wide variation that we have in the study of language across all of these disciplines. It's also visceral because there has been this kind of long-term investment by some scholars to define what linguistics is and what it isn't in order to continue with some of this gatekeeping. So to address this kind of long-standing challenge, we took a very broad view of the study of language, and we focused on the dominant themes in language research that highlight what we should be paying attention. And so this is the connection between somebody's work like myself, who works on race, and meeting with Jalen Pittman, who works on AI, to think about how those things, computational linguistics and sociolinguistics, meet together. And I won't go over the other ones just in the interest of time. But the article traced the activity of linguists by noting how many linguists and language researchers exist in many departments other than linguistics, in communications and rhetoric, in education, and ethnic study departments. We also found them represented across a variety of scholarly associations, not only the Linguistic Society of America, but also the American Anthropological Association, MLA, NCTE, LRA, ACTFL, the American Speech and Hearing Association, the Max Planck Institute for Psychology, and Association for Computational Linguistics. And so our review kind of revealed the depth and the breadth of language study across the academy, and it provided us with a clear picture of the myriad of ways that people trained in language studies could impact our society. And so we then presented 3 case studies to demonstrate different approaches. And what we found is that people who are interested in this work really center the human. And they do that when they center the human, it could result in what Anne Charity Hudley calls liberatory linguistics. And so the components of this linguistic liberation are displayed across these examples included the things that are on the screen. So first, it included self-determination, or the ability for people who were involved in these studies to define themselves and their own language practices. It also, these studies displayed action and resistance as both a practical and aspirational strategy. And third, these studies all had a steadfast commitment to the humanization of the people who were being studied within the process of research. And so we found that those already engaged in these practices have often done so from a transdisciplinary framework, from transdisciplinary methodologies, as well as orientations. So to summarize in this short, very presentation, here are some benefits of transdisciplinarity in world language education. So firstly, transdisciplinarity allows us to integrate the sociohistoric context that I was talking about earlier into our research and to our teaching. It allows us to attend to the ways that race and capitalism have shaped everything that we do. It also allows us to move from the human, those who will be in our classrooms and those who are benefiting from our research. And it allows us to do this in order to disrupt language learning traditions that prop up prescriptive or decontextualized focused on language form without focusing on the human. Importantly, integrating knowledges from other fields allows us to directly contest colonial power formations, some of which have become acute in language education since the integration of post-civil rights language policies. And finally, it gives us access to thoughts and labor of those who have already been intimately engaged in the work to kind of disrupt these colonial power formations. And so I'll end my presentation with a quote from a dear friend who tragically passed away a few months ago. In reflecting on doing this language work, Dr. John Henner reminded us that how you language is beautiful. He said, don't let anybody tell you your language is wrong. Your language is the story of your life. And so I hope we take this lesson from Dr. Hinner with us when we think about ourselves, when we think about our students, and when we think about our research and the global languaging communities that we hope to impact with our work. It's only through thinking about our language as love and as beauty that we're able to kind of cross these disciplinary frames in order to have more liberatory work. So thank you as always. I have a QR code on the screen. I always end my presentation by saying that we should support artists who understand language in ways that we are not able to understand it as researchers. This QR code leads to links to support the poet that I featured, Ariana Brown, early in this talk, and I look forward to continuing our conversation.
Thank you so much, Eris. I guess in a webinar, you don't have the reactions, but I'm sitting here applauding and smiling and wanting to send you love emojis. But that was wonderful, and I look forward to looking at ways that this intersects with what Dr. Kubota will share with us, and then how it informs a conversation that we'll have later. So thank you for that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Yuko Kubota, who happens to be joining us very graciously from Japan, where it is Friday morning right now. So we're excited for her flexibility. Dr. Kubota is a professor in the Department of Language and Literacy Education at the University of British Columbia. Personal story, she was also one of my professors during my time at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So very, I feel very lucky and honored to have been able to learn from her from such an early point in my career. And again, don't have time to say all the wonderful things that she's known for, but very broadly, I will say Dr. Kubota focuses on critical literacies and pedagogies, social justice, and themes of anti-racism in language education. And so I'll now pass it over to her to share some of her perspectives on this topic.
Unmute. Thank you very much, LJ. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Need to adjust. Okay. All right. Thank you for inviting me to this innovative event. And first of all, let me talk about my professional positionality like Iris did. Years ago, I was an EFL teacher in secondary school in Japan. And later, I began teaching Japanese as a foreign language in California, and followed by University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where I met LJ. And since 2009, I have been teaching at University of British Columbia. So I no longer teach Japanese courses, but I volunteer teaching Japanese to local foreign residents in my hometown in Japan whenever I come back here. So as a teacher, I have been influenced by critical pedagogy promoted by educators like Paulo Freire. One of his principles is dialogic approach rather than banking education, which is one way deposit of knowledge. Today, I don't intend to impose critical ideas onto you, but since this town hall series is about language and liberation, and today's event is about justice and transformation, I will focus on critical approaches to world language education research. So in critical pedagogy, praxis is another key concept. It means committed reflection and action for transformation. So this means that the goal of a research that envisions justice and liberation is indeed praxis involving action for change. So it's not enough to conduct research to generate new knowledge only. It needs to be connected to actions for change, like LJ and Aris mentioned. So here's my outline today. I'm going to talk briefly about transdisciplinarity, justice, and liberation. I feel like I'm just repeating what Aris said, but let me talk about those. And then I'm going to briefly talk about research domains and context, and then I will show you some examples of praxis and summary and questions. So first, I need to define what these words are, okay? So first, transdisciplinarity. So today's town hall is entitled Future of the World Language Education Research, Transdisciplinary Connections. To be honest, I had to look up what transdisciplinary means. So like Aris said, did, I went to Wikipedia and we were looking at the same website. And so I just took a look at this online article that was listed on Wikipedia. So in essence, transdisciplinary education integrates different disciplines in a harmonious way to engage learners with new knowledge and skills for lifelong learning. So core principles weave through disciplines, allowing us to seek sustainable development and recognize the plurality of languages, cultures, and conceptual frameworks. So respect, solidarity, and cooperation should be global standards for the entire human development with no boundaries. So this may sound a bit bland from the perspective of critical pedagogy, but it points to the importance of shared commitments across boundaries. So second, justice is a key word for this town hall event. In fact, social justice has become a buzzword in today's educational practices. So what does it mean? So according to Jajda et al., it is the principle of an egalitarian society that's based on the principles of equality and solidarity, that understands and values human rights, and that recognizes the dignity of every human being. And similar definition was given by Yesid Ortega in Applied Linguistics article a few years back. So, essentially, it's to affirm and protect the dignity of every individual and every group. This includes women, speakers of non-standard language, racialized people, indigenous people, disabled people, people belong to Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+, religious minorities, caste minorities, and so on. And of course, people cannot live without environment. So valuing human dignity means to protect our environment, our land, water, trees, plants, animals, etc. So First Nations perspectives are very precious here. Third, the theme of the town hall series is again language as liberation. So when I saw this theme, I thought about Paulo Freire's discussion on liberation. So I reviewed his dialogue with Irish Shore. So this publication came out in 1987. Some of the audience were not born in 1987, but this is a very powerful text. By rereading it, I learned so much. So Freire comments that liberation is not an individual act. Rather, liberation is a social act. Liberating education is a social process of illumination. So for Freire, it is to illuminate reality, or a process of knowing reality, how reality is made. So here, research will illuminate the reality of the system of domination and subordination in society, and it is about transdisciplinary engagement for liberation. So moving on to research domains. we can integrate a lot of domains and contexts, and this is not exhaustive list, but it lays out some ideas for research. So you can have different focus. It could be world languages, ESL, EFL, heritage language, age level, all levels, and identity, race, gender, class, disability, and so forth. And institutional instructional mode could be face-to-face, virtual study abroad, target groups, various groups beyond classroom. And conceptual focus could be linguistic plurality, fluidity. Translanguaging is a very popular term these days, but then there's a sort of conflict with the access paradox, and intersectionality in terms of racial linguistic perspectives, critical disability studies, queer pedagogies, and so forth, and of course, decolonial perspectives. And research paradigms could be quantitative, qualitative, post-qualitative, mixed methods, various paradigms. So here, it's important to note that justice affirming transdisciplinary research for liberation does not privilege a certain research paradigm. So true, research paradigm has a specific ontology and epistemology. For instance, quantitative research conceptualizes truth as something that's objectively verified and generalized through quantification and replication. In contrast, qualitative research conceptualizes truth as contextual and interpretive through a lens of researcher with a unique positionality. So but both paradigms can illuminate reality through justice affirming research for transformation. So an example is investigation of intersectionality of race and language. It can be investigated through qualitative or conceptual research drawing on racial linguistic perspectives proposed by researchers like Flores and Rosa. And these researchers and colleagues problematize racial linguistic ideologies, which stigmatize the linguistic practices of racialized learners, even if those practices correspond to standardized norms. So this is just one example of a publication for dual language education. In contrast, quantitative research on reverse linguistic stereotyping, spearheaded by Donald Rubin as early as 1990s, Oh Kim Kang, Stephanie Lindman, and so forth, have illuminated how visual information of the speaker's race triggers listeners' perception of the speech quality and the professional competence of the speaker. So you see that research paradigms are different, but both recognize the intersectional justice, injustices of race and language and work towards liberation. So I hope the future research agenda will seek this type of transdisciplinary synergy across different research paradigms and domains. So as I mentioned earlier, critical pedagogy and transdisciplinary research for liberation needs to be founded on praxis, critical reflection and action, right? That integrates research through praxis. So with this, I would like to share with you two projects. So due to time constraints, I will share an excerpt of one of them. So the first one is based on our qualitative interview research on the linguistic experiences of graduate students and faculty members of color. So we published this paper, Your English is So Good, and we turned this into animation videos drawing on research-based theater for the purpose of awareness raising among students, faculty, staff, administrators, and so forth in the form of public scholarship. So you can use this video however you want, and it's a YouTube video, and it has free access. So I'll just, and then two episodes And I will show you excerpt from the second episode, which is conversation between three native English-speaking Chinese Canadians, okay, graduate students.
Hi, welcome to the Graduate Student Social.
Hi.
Do you mind wearing one of these name tags?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So grab a drink and sit anywhere you like.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Andy. Hi, Michael. Sorry for being so late. Parent-teacher night. Need I say more?
No worries, Emily. I get it.
I'm sure when you went into teaching French in school, it was for those inspiring parent-teacher conferences. I'm just happy you made it out in one piece.
Oh, well, barely. So get this. I'm sitting there, right? And I have my Eiffel Tower on the corner of my desk, and I know it's cliche, but I want parents to know who I am. But they still keep coming up and asking me, are you the Chinese teacher or are you the music teacher?
Wait, what?
I mean, I made it obvious who I was. Like, my name tag says Madame Chan in French, and I was even standing in front of a big Quebec flag and a French flag. But a lot of the parents just can't seem to accept that I'm the French teacher.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And that must be really frustrating, Emily.
Yeah.
Okay, so it goes on to different issues, but there's also a script on the website, so you can use this as a reader's theater if you would like. So the next one is called World English's Voices in Canada. So this is a documentary film that we created, and this is not based on research, but our scholarly knowledge informed in creating this documentary film. The full version is about 47 minutes, and it's divided into 5 episodes. Episode 4 is language and race, and so you can you're welcome to use this however you would like, and so please visit this website. So in conclusion, World Language Education Research for Liberation aims to illuminate reality, and transdisciplinary research embraces justice-affirming critical pedagogy. Synergies across different research paradigms should be sought. The future of world language education research should embrace praxis. So questions, what research agenda for liberation would you develop, and how would you exercise praxis? So that was my presentation. Please contact me if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation to both of you. And I am going to share my screen now as we move into the collaborative piece of our time together. Like I said, this is a collaborative event. This is not something where I just want you to sit and receive information. That's part of it. We do want to share our expertise and share information. But I also want to think about how we all can be involved in transforming the field, right? So I have here several ways that we can engage within the next 10 to 15 minutes. There is a Padlet. If you know me, you know I love a good Padlet. So you can use the QR code there on a smart device, or you can just type that URL. It's not case sensitive. I just use capital letters in order for you to be able to read it more easily, but it's just padlet.com/profrandolph/actful. And it'll take you to a Padlet. And if you haven't used Padlet before, you just click the plus sign, and then there are many options. Most people, you'll probably just want to put in a text message, but if you're feeling fancy, you can include a link to something, a resource that you like, a study that you think reflects what we talked about today. You can even upload an image And if you're really fancy, you can even draw an image if you want to take a chance and do that. But I hope that we get some good feedback there, because at the end of this meeting, I'm going to take those reflections and thoughts that you put on Padlet and think about what are the common threads in order to direct our conversations moving forward. So during this time, I see that there's already a question in the Q&A, so we can start there. If you have questions for the panelists, remember to use that Q&A feature. And then there several other questions there that I hope that you will address in the Padlet. What resonates with you in your own instructional, professional, or research context? Drawing upon Ryuko Kubota's question from her presentation, what research agenda for liberation would you develop, and how would you exercise praxis? What is ACTFL's role in supporting and promoting this approach to research and praxis? And then are there any takeaways, any words of wisdom, any next steps that you would like to share? So please access that Padlet and type the comments there. And while you're thinking about that and putting your thoughts in the Padlet, I want to start out with this question from Bethany Daniel to our panelists. Bethany thanks you both for such wonderful insights and perspectives. And Bethany wants to know, as an early career scholar, Bethany is curious if you could speak to some of the research methods and approaches that you have found helpful in doing transdisciplinary and liberatory language education research. The two of you had talked about already different types of quantitative, qualitative approaches. Eris, your project, the literature review, document analysis. So I wonder if there's any advice that you would give to a beginning scholar about points of entry for this type of work in terms of research.
Yeah, I can start if you would like. I would say, one of the things that is going to help you do this is to read very, very, very widely. And this is something that is sometimes difficult to do as you're kind of juggling the many, many things that you're required to do as an early career scholar. And so what I did was I made sure that I was able to access different kinds of grants that allowed me to do reading in different fields, right? And so as a linguist, we are kind of categorized as social scientists. And so not a lot of our grants let us go sit in archives. And so I was looking at Mellon funding that is usually reserved for humanities folks. And I was going over to humanities to get funding from them so that I could learn how to read within that field. And then I was looking at NSF funding so that I could learn how to read in social science in social science fields. And so what it is finding a way to give yourself time to read across fields so that you can see the norms and the different kinds of methodologies that are being used to study some of the same kind of topics from different perspectives. And that way you're able to kind of build your own conceptual frameworks for how you're entering your conversations. And then the second thing that I will say is that really allowing my development of research questions to be guided by the communities who I was interested in speaking to, with, and about, right? And making sure that whatever I'm reading, whatever I'm writing, is also accessible to those communities so that it becomes kind of action research in practice with the communities that I'm working with. And that takes time. So knowing that it takes time and advocating for yourself to give yourself that time is important.
Yeah, I agree with Iris. Reading in different disciplines, it's very important to become familiar with different discourses, different expectations. But at the same time, it's useful to work with other scholars in different disciplines. That would be really exciting and very educational, because typically we are trained to do a certain type of research. I no longer do quantitative approach, so I don't know how to do that. But if you collaborate with others who are expert in other research paradigms, then I think you will expand your opportunity to explore a topic in different ways and in depth. So collaboration will be very useful.
Thank you so much. And I see here I'll put up what the palette looks like, so you can see here some folks are already typing in some comments in the Padlet, but there are lots of reflections about the poem that that Eris shared and how that resonated with people. And one of the questions that I had, I wonder, Yuko Kubota, if you could talk about the importance of public facing research and why you were motivated to make these more accessible, to share these types of findings in more accessible spaces. For example, the videos and the book that you're writing, which is a book that's targeted toward the general public and not necessarily researchers specifically. In particular, with regard to the theme that we're talking about tonight, and then maybe how researchers can balance the expectations of their profession in terms of getting tenure and things like that with the value of research that's also, you know, going to make a change in the within the communities that you want to target. And either one of you can talk about that, but specifically Dr. Kubota, since you mentioned that, and Dr. Clemens, feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, LJ, for the important question. Of course, I'm tenured and I'm full professor, so I don't have to worry about the publications and things like that. I increasingly became very frustrated about the lack of understanding among general public, including some administrators and policymakers, because a lot of important decisions are made without informed knowledge generated by us researchers. So I feel we need to do a lot more public scholarship in order to raise general public's awareness of all these important issues. I think as tenured faculty, and I encourage tenured faculty members to be proactive, to transform the institutional system for tenure promotion review criteria so that we can value those public scholarship projects and you know, the products. I think it's very, very important. Why do we do research? We want to change the world. Of course, some people want to promote themselves in order to do research, which is important. We have to make living and we have to have money to live on. But at the same time, as researchers, we are privileged compared to other people in society, marginalized people, and we need to contribute to the world. And in order to do that, we need to share our knowledge with others in accessible way. So that has been my thought.
I'll just quickly add to that as a untenured person who does have to think about, you know, maintaining food on my table while I do this work. There were a couple of things that I was really focused on during the job search, but more importantly, when we're thinking about doing that work in community, you work with people who have been engaged in solution building for their communities, right? Especially marginalized communities. And so taking from their knowledges in order to do some negotiation on my campus was really my way of going. And so as I was doing negotiations, during my job search process, I was really asking the questions of how can we make my public scholarship count towards my towards my tenure, and then getting those things in writing, right? And so being very, very specific about the things and the activities that I believed were research activity, and getting corroboration from not only the people who are in my department, who I would be working with and hopefully collaborating with, but also from upper administration, so from deans and provosts during those conversations, which you don't often have a chance to do except for at the beginning of your time working at an institution. And so using those times when you have the ear of your administration to kind of have these conversations and advocate for more investment in public scholarship as a way of kind of showing your research productivity. I'll also say that one of the things that university administrators listen to is money, grant money. And so there's a question in the chat about advice around proposing and writing for public scholarship. And there's a couple of ways that I've been able to kind of say this is something that's very important. So one of them is there are national grant foundations like the NEH, which is the National Endowment of the Humanities, that has public scholarship grants for up to $200,000 to $300,000. There's also programs like the op-ed project that you can bring to your campus as a professional development for not only yourself but for other people who are working with you, in order to teach you how to write op-eds. That is a different kind of genre of writing that we're not trained to do necessarily in grad school. And so when you bring those things and they bring the publicity with them, university administrators often listen, and that is the ways that we can kind of institute some sort of change so that it impacts the ways that we're able to get credit for the work that we do, while also serving our communities and making sure that their voices are heard. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you, and thanks for going ahead and answering one of the questions that we had in the Q&A, as you were responding to the question there. As I'm looking at the Padlet, a couple of questions that I am seeing is relating this work to the support and sustainability of what we typically call less commonly taught languages. And I just want to share something exciting that we're doing in ACTFL right now is we already have a less commonly taught languages special interest group, or SIG as we call them. And we have an immersion SIG and we have a SIG for heritage languages. And what we're doing to even expand upon that and to try to identify and mobilize people who are committed to this, we're in developing an indigenous languages SIG for the first time ever within ACTFL. And so that will be a space for people who teach those languages and who are interested in advocacy related to those languages to be able to build and sustain professional community, I hope. And then there are a few questions in the chat about AI. I didn't know if the two of you had any thoughts on that, but I do want to tell that person to hold that thought because next month's town hall is specifically about looking at AI through a lens of liberation, justice, and equity. And so I'm very excited about that. And someone in the chat did include an issue of applied linguistics that is a resource for AI and world language teaching within this topic. So, and then Beth Wassel just made a comment in the chat about transdisciplinarity in terms of a research agenda that looks broadly at the fields of world language education, bilingual education, ESL, teaching English as a second or foreign language, etc. So thank you, Beth, for making yourself available as a resource. Are there any concluding thoughts that either one of you would like to share as we wrap up?
I'll just conclude by saying I really appreciate everybody taking the time to come in here and to collectively learn. Collectively learning together is also the way that we create change, that we are able to kind of have ideas to bring to our respective spaces, and share what we do and the passion for what we do so that people understand the importance of it in society. So thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us, and it's a very wonderful opportunity for us to learn together, learn from each other, and I feel like teaching and learning is a lifelong process, and I have been in this field for so many years, but every day I'm learning a new thing. So it's so exciting that so many people are here to learn. So please stay in touch and really promote our field towards more liberation and transformation. And I'm just so amazed by the amount of energy in this field, because I was a very active, not very active, but participating actful participant until about 15 years ago. And I have seen so many changes, transformation. So it's really wonderful to see this transformation, amazing transformation. So thank you very much for your leadership, LJ, and thank you very much for all participants who are committed to this project.
Thank you so much. And thank you both again, Dr. Kubota and Dr. Clemens, for taking the time to join us today. I have a couple of announcements before we all sign off. Moving forward, what are we going to do with this? Like I said, I didn't want this to be a one and done conversation. So we will share this recording as well as a summary of the questions that you all had, the things that you put in the Padlet. We'll figure out a way to organize that in some way that's accessible and makes sense to other people. Also, the Research Special Interest Group is going to create a space for ongoing conversations in the discussion forum. One thing that's really cool about ACTFL, all of our special interest groups are completely free. Not every organization does that, so that's super exciting. So if you are a member of ACTFL, you can join any and all special interest groups, really. So as broad as your interests are, you can join the groups. But in particular, the Research Special Interest Group has something special planned in order to create space for us to continue these conversations. And then also, both the ACTFL board and the Research and Assessment Committee are going to use insights from this town hall in order to inform our continued development of our strategic plan and as well as our decision making. These are happening at the end of every month except for June and July this year, leading up to the convention in November. So next month we're super excited to be talking about equitable, imaginative, and justice-centered AI in world language education. So we hope that you'll join us again next month. It's the final Thursday of May, same time, and we have some wonderful speakers planned for that. Please come again. Tell your colleagues, these are all free and open to the public. You don't have to be an ACTFL member to participate. We want as many people as possible who are connected to the language profession to be able to take advantage of these discussions. So hoping to see you all in the future months. And also, gotta do a plug for the convention in Philly in the fall. Hope to see you all in November 22nd through the 24th. ACTFL is always the weekend before Thanksgiving. So hopefully we'll see you there in Philly. We have a great convention plan. We're already developing the sessions for it. So it's going to be a wonderful time. Looking forward to seeing you then. Other than that, I will go ahead and end it here. And again, feel free to reach out. My email is open if you have any specific questions or things that you think ACTFL should be thinking about. Reach out to me via social media or via email. Very happy to receive your comments and feedback. Thanks again to our presenters, our panelists, as well as our organizers, the ACTFL staff, and of course, all of you, the participants who have joined us today. Take care. Bye.